Drone crews have launched more missiles and killed more people than nearly anyone else in the military in the past decade, but the military does not count them as combat troops. Because they were not deployed, they seldom got the same recovery periods or mental health screenings as other fighters. Instead, they were treated as office workers expected to show up for endless shifts in a forever war, which results in disasters. In today's video, we talk about the sad story of Captain Kevin Larson, so make sure to stay till the end of the video to know the most famous drone pilot's fate was decided by drones. After hiding all night in the mountains, Air Force Captain Kevin Larson crouched behind a boulder and watched the forest through his breath, waiting for the police he knew would come. It was January 19th, 2020. He was clinging to an assault rifle with 30 rounds at a conviction that, after all he had been through, there was no way he was going to prison. Captain Larson was a drone pilot, one of the best. He flew the heavily armed MQ-9 Reaper, and in 650 combat missions between 2013 and 2018, he had launched at least 188 airstrikes, earned 20 medals for achievement, and killed a top man on the United States' most wanted terrorist list. The 32-year-old pilot kept a handwritten thank you note on his refrigerator from the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. He was proud of it, but would not say what for, because like nearly everything he did in the drone program, it was a secret. He had to keep the details locked behind the high-security doors at Creech Air Force Base in Indian Springs, Nevada. In the Air Force, drone pilots did not pick the targets. That was the job of someone pilots called the customer. The customer might be a conventional ground force commander, the CIA, or a classified special operations strike cell. It didn't matter. The customer got what the customer wanted. And sometimes what the customer wanted did not seem right. There were missile strikes so hasty that they hit women and children, attacks built on such flimsy intelligence that they made targets of ordinary villagers, and classified rules of engagement that allowed the customer to knowingly kill up to 20 civilians when taking out an enemy. Crews had to watch it all in color and high definition. He tried to hide everything, but tendrils of distress would eventually poke up in a comment before bed or a grim joke at the bar. Once in 2017, his father pressed him about his work, and Captain Larson described a mission in which the customer told him to track and kill a suspected Al-Qaeda member. Then he said the customer told him to use the Reaper's high-definition camera to follow the man's body to the cemetery and kill everyone who attended the funeral. Captain Larson's story, woven together with those of other drone crew members, reveals an unseen toll on the other end of those remote-controlled strikes. Under relenting stress, several former crew members said people broke down. Drinking and divorce became common. Some left the operations floor in tears, others attempted suicide, and the military failed to recognize the full impact. Despite hundreds of missions, Captain Larson's personnel file under the heading Combat Service offers only a single word: none. Drone crew members said in interviews that while killing remotely is different from killing on the ground, it still carves deep scars. In many ways it's more intense, said Neil Shinneman, a drone sensor operator who retired as a Master Sergeant from the Air Force in 2019. A fighter jet might see a target for 20 minutes. We had to watch the target for days, weeks, and even months. We saw him play with his kids. We saw him interact with his family. We watched his whole life unfold. You are remote, but you're also very much connected. Then one day, when all parameters are met, you kill him. Then you watch the death. You see the remorse and the burial. People often think that this job is going to be like a video game, and I have to warn them, there is no reset button. Captain Larson tried to cope with the trauma by using psychedelic drugs. That became another secret he had to keep. Eventually, the Air Force found out. He was charged with using and distributing illegal drugs and stripped of his flight status. His marriage fell apart and he was put on trial, facing a possible prison term of more than 20 years. Desperate to avoid prison, reeling from what he saw as a betrayal by the military he had dedicated his life to, Captain Larson ran. A vexing moral landscape. Captain Larson grew up in Yakima, Washington, the son of police officers. He was a straight and narrow Eagle Scout who went to church nearly every Sunday and once admonished a longtime friend to stay away from marijuana. At the University of Washington, where he was an honors student, he joined ROTC and the Civil Air Patrol, set on becoming a fighter pilot. The Air Force had other plans. By the time he was commissioned in 2012, the Pentagon had developed seemingly insatiable appetite for drones, and the Air Force was struggling to keep up. That year it turned out more drone pilots than traditional fighter pilots and still could not meet the demand. He was sobbing when he got the news, so disappointed he wanted to fly, his mother Laura Larson said in an interview. But once he started, he enjoyed it. He really felt like he was doing something important. The specifics of Captain Larson's missions are largely a mystery. He kept the classified details hidden from his parents and former wife. His closest friends in the attack squadron and dozens of other current and former crew members did not respond to requests for interviews. Secrecy laws and non-disclosure agreements make it a crime to discuss classified details. In February 2018, Captain Larson and his wife, Bree Larson, got into an argument. She was angry at him for staying out all night and smashed his phone, she recalled in an interview. He dragged her out of the house and locked her out, barely clothed. The Las Vegas police came, and when they asked if there were any drugs or weapons in the house, Ms. Larson told them about the bag of psilocybin mushrooms her husband kept in the garage. If you've made it this far, make sure to subscribe and leave a like to help us make more of this great content. When she and Captain Larson had met in 2016, she said he was already taking mushrooms once every few months, often with other pilots. He also took MDMA, known as ecstasy or Molly, a few times a year. The drugs might have been illegal, but he told her they offered relief. He would just say he had a very stressful job and he needed it, Ms. Larson said. And you could tell, for weeks after he was more relaxed, more focused and more loving. It seemed therapeutic. A growing number of combat veterans use psychedelic drugs illicitly, amid mounting evidence that they are potent treatments for the psychological wounds of war. Both MDMA and psilocybin are expected to soon be approved for limited medical use by the Food and Drug Administration. In Las Vegas, the civilian authorities were willing to forgive Captain Larson, but the Air Force charged him with a litany of crimes: drug possession and distribution, making false statements to Air Force investigators, and a charge unique to the armed forces: conduct unbecoming of an officer. His squadron grounded him, forbade him to wear a flight suit, and told him not to talk to fellow pilots. No one screened him for PTSD or other psychological injuries from his service, Ms. Larson said, adding, "I don't think anyone realized it might be connected." As the prosecution plodded forward over 2 years, Captain Larson worked at the base gym and organized volunteer groups to do community service. His marriage was annulled. Struggling with his mental health and seeking productive ways to cope with the trauma, he read book after book on positive thinking and set up a special meditation room in his house, according to his girlfriend at the time, Becca Triano. "I don't know what he saw, what he dealt with," she said. "What I did see toward the end was him really working hard to try to stay sane." The trial finally came in January 2020. His former wife and a pilot friend testified about his drug use. The police produced the evidence. That was all. After deliberating for a few hours on the morning of January 17th, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on nearly every count. The pilot would be sentenced after a break for lunch. His lawyer told him to be back in an hour. Instead, he took off. He loaded his jeep with food and clothes and sped away, convinced that he was facing a long prison sentence, Ms. Triano said. Within hours, the Air Force had a warrant out for his arrest. Captain Larson headed southwest to Los Angeles and stayed the night with a friend, then started heading north. By the afternoon of Saturday, January 18th, he was driving by vineyards and redwood groves on U.S. Route 101 in Mendocino County, north of San Francisco, when the California Highway Patrol spotted his jeep and pulled him over. Captain Larson stopped and waited calmly for the officer to walk up to his window. Then he gunned it, down the highway and onto a narrow dirt logging road that snaked up into the mountains. After several miles, he pulled off into the trees and hid. The police could not find him, but they knew something he did not. All the roads in the canyon were dead ends, and officers were blocking the only way out. In the morning, during a briefing at the bottom of the canyon, records show that Air Force agents explained to the Mendocino County Sheriff's deputies that the wanted man was a deserter who had fled a drug conviction, was probably armed, and possibly suicidal. The officers drove up the canyon and spotted tire tracks on a narrow turnoff. Agents crept up on foot until they spotted the blue jeep in the trees, but did not risk going further. The deputies had a better option, something that could get a view of the jeep without any danger. A small drone soon launched into the sky. Captain Larson was hiding behind a mossy boulder. There was no phone service deep in the canyon, no way to call for whatever hope or solace he might have conjured. He could only record a video message for his family members. One by one, he told them that he loved them. "I'm sorry," he said. "I won't go to prison, so I'm going to end this. This was always the plan." There was a lot he did not explain, things that have kept his family and friends wondering in the years since. He did not talk about the hundreds of secret missions or their impact. He did not say what it had felt like to have his commander stand by quietly as civilian deaths became routine, then stay just as quiet when a decorated pilot was prosecuted for drug possession. He did not talk about the other pilots who had done the same drugs and then avoided him like a virus after he got caught. Perhaps he was planning to say more, but as he spoke into the phone camera, he was interrupted by an angry buzzing like a swarm of bees. "I can hear the drones," he said. "They're looking for me." Had they found him alive, his pursuers would have been able to tell him this. In the end, the Air Force had decided not to sentence him to prison, only to dismissal. But now, just as Captain Larson had done countless times, the officers could only study the drone footage and parse the evidence, slumped behind the boulder, shot with his own assault rifle, of another unintended death. That's it for today. Let me know what you think of today's sad story and what can be done to prevent any future incidents similar to this one. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video just like I've enjoyed making it, and make sure to comment with any future videos that you're interested in watching. I'll be seeing you all soon, but until then, watch this video to learn more about the Terminator drones used by the Ukrainian military.